H separated the waters on the earth from the waters in the sky. On the third day, God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered into one place, and let dry land appear." And so it happened. The waters gathered together, forming seas, and dry land appeared. God called the dry land earth, and the gathered waters seas. God said, "Let the earth produce plants, grass, seeds, and fruit trees." And the earth was covered with greenery and trees bearing fruit. On the fourth day, God created lights to illuminate the earth and to govern time. He made two great lights, the greater light, the sun, to rule the day, and the lesser light, the moon, to rule the night. He also created the stars and placed them in the sky. On the fifth day, God created life in the water and in the sky. He said, "Let the waters teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky." And God created great sea creatures and all the fish, as well as all kinds of birds. On the sixth day, God created animals, wild beasts, domestic livestock, and all creeping creatures. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it." On the seventh day, God finished his creation and rested. He blessed this day and made it holy because on this day he rested from all his work. The fall of man. In the beautiful Garden of Eden, God placed Adam and Eve to live there and care for it. They were allowed to eat the fruit of any tree in the garden except for one, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God warned them that if they ate the fruit from this tree, they would surely die. One day, a cunning serpent, more crafty than any other creature God had made, slithered up to Eve. The serpent asked Eve, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" Eve replied, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, 'You must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die.'" The serpent, tempting her, said, "You will not surely die. For God knows that when you eat of it your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Eve looked at the fruit and saw that it was attractive and could give wisdom. She took the fruit and ate it. She also gave some fruit to Adam, who was with her, and he also ate it. At that moment, their eyes were opened, and they realized they were naked. They sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Later, they heard God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid among the trees. God called to Adam, "Where are you?" Adam answered, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." God asked, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" Adam blamed Eve, saying, "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." Then God asked Eve, "What is this you have done?" Eve blamed the serpent, saying, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." God then pronounced the consequences for each of them. He cursed the serpent, saying it would crawl on its belly and eat dust all its life, and that there would be enmity between the serpent and the woman's offspring. To Eve, God said he would greatly increase her pain in childbirth, that she would desire her husband, and he would rule over her. To Adam, God said that because he listened to his wife and ate from the forbidden tree, the ground would be cursed because of him. He would have to work hard all his life to get food from it. The ground would produce thorns and thistles for him, and he would eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of his brow, he would eat his food until he returned to the ground, since from it he was taken. For dust he was, and to dust he would return. God made garments of skin for Adam and Eve and clothed them. He said, "The man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat, and live forever." So God banished them from the Garden of Eden and placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. This marked the end of their perfect existence in Eden and the beginning of their life of toil and hardship outside the garden. Cain and Abel. After Adam and Eve were banished from Eden, they had two sons, Cain and Abel. Cain became a farmer and grew crops, while Abel became a shepherd and cared for flocks of sheep. One day, both brothers decided to bring an offering to God. Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering, while Abel chose the best lambs from his flock. God looked with favor on Abel's offering, but rejected Cain's gift. This made Cain very upset and angry. Cain wondered for a long time why his offering was not accepted. He felt injustice and envy toward his brother. Cain saw how God favored Abel, and this fueled his anger. Envy turned into rage, and he began to think about how to get rid of his brother. God noticed Cain was angry and said to him, "Why are you angry? If you do what is right, you will be accepted. But if you do not, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." Cain did not listen to God. He invited Abel into the field under the pretext of talking. When they were there, Cain attacked his brother and killed him. This was the first murder in human history. God asked Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" Cain replied, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" God said, "What have you done? Listen. Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth." Cain was afraid and said, "My punishment is more than I can bear. Whoever finds me will kill me." God reassured Cain and said, "Not so. Anyone who kills you will suffer vengeance 7 times over." God put a mark on Cain so that no one would touch him. Cain went away and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. There he built a city and named it after his son Enoch. Thus ended the story of Cain and Abel, which shows us how envy and anger can lead to tragedy, but also how God continues to care for people even when they make big mistakes. Noah and the flood. After the tragedy with Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve continued their lives and had a third son, Seth. Seth became the ancestor of many generations. The list of Adam's descendants is long, and among them was one man who should be told about in more detail. His name was Noah. Noah was a righteous and honest man, the only one who remained faithful to God among a world that had become corrupt and violent. God saw this and decided to bring order by cleansing the earth of evil. God told Noah about his plan and instructed him to build a large ship, the Arkansas. God gave Noah detailed instructions on how to build the ark and what materials to use. The ark had to be large enough to accommodate Noah, his family, and a pair of every kind of animal. Noah, trusting God, began to build the Arkansas. The people around him laughed and thought he was crazy, as there were no signs of an impending flood. However, Noah continued to work, believing in God's words. When the ark was finished, God told Noah to bring his family and a pair of every kind of animal into it, from elephants to small birds. After everyone was inside, God closed the door of the Arkansas. The flood began. Rain poured for 40 days and 40 nights. The water rose higher and higher, flooding the entire earth and destroying every living thing that was not in the Arkansas. The water covered even the highest mountains. The ark floated on the waters, and Noah, his family, and the animals were safe. After many days, the rain stopped, and the water began to gradually recede. Noah sent out a dove to check if dry land could be found. The dove returned with an olive branch in its beak, a sign that the water had receded and the earth had reappeared. When the earth was dry, God told Noah to come out of the Arkansas. Noah, his family, and all the animals left the Arkansas. Noah built an altar and offered a sacrifice of thanksgiving to God for their salvation. God promised Noah that there would never again be a flood to destroy all the earth. As a sign of this covenant, God gave humanity the rainbow. He said, "Whenever a rainbow appears in the clouds, it will be a reminder of my covenant with you and all living creatures." Thus, Noah and his descendants began a new life on the cleansed earth. Through his faith and obedience to God, Noah showed that, even in the most difficult times, it is important to maintain faith and follow divine instructions. The Tower of Babel. After the flood and the salvation of Noah, his descendants began to repopulate the earth. At that time, all people spoke the same language and understood each other. United, they decided to build a city and a tall tower that would reach the sky. They wanted to make a name for themselves and not be scattered all over the earth. The people settled on a plain in the land of Shinar. They began to make bricks and bake them to use instead of stone, and they used tar for mortar. The plan was ambitious, to build a city with a huge tower that would become a symbol of their strength and unity. God saw what the people were doing and understood that their pride and desire for self-glorification could lead to great sin. He said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. To stop the construction, God decided to confuse their language so that people would no longer understand each other. Suddenly, chaos broke out on the construction site. People spoke different languages, not understanding one another. The workers could not continue the construction because they could not explain to each other what to do next. After their languages were confused, the people scattered all over the earth. The city and the tower were left unfinished. The place was called Babel, which means confusion, because it was there that God confused the language of all the people. The story of the Tower of Babel teaches us that pride and the desire for self-glorification can lead to separation and misunderstanding. But thanks to this, people settled all over the earth, and each nation found its own place and language. This story explains why there are so many different languages and cultures in the world. The story of Abraham. After the people tried to build the Tower of Babel and God scattered them all over the earth, dividing their languages, a time of new paths and new people chosen by God for great deeds began. Among such people was Abraham, who lived in the city of Ur. Abraham was a descendant of Noah and came from the line of Shem. He was known for his righteousness and faithfulness to God. One day, God spoke to Abraham and told him to leave his country, his people, and his father's household and go to the land he would show him. God promised Abraham that he would make him into a great nation, bless him, and make his name great. Without hesitation, Abraham obeyed God, taking with him his wife Sarah, his nephew Lot, and all their possessions. They set out on a journey, led by faith and hope for the fulfillment of God's promises. Abraham and his family went to the land of Canaan. When they arrived, God appeared to Abraham again and promised that this land would belong to his descendants. Abraham built an altar there as a sign of thanks and worship. But soon after, a severe famine struck the land, and Abraham had to go to Egypt to survive. In Egypt, Abraham feared for his life because Sarah was very beautiful, and he thought the Egyptians might kill him to take her. So he told Sarah to say she was his sister. Pharaoh's officials noticed Sarah's beauty and took her to Pharaoh's palace. Pharaoh treated Abraham well because of her, but God sent plagues on Pharaoh and his household. When Pharaoh learned the truth, he sent Abraham and Sarah away with all their possessions. Returning to Canaan, the herdsmen of Abraham and Lot began to quarrel because the land could not support both of their large flocks. To avoid conflict, Abraham suggested they separate. Lot chose the fertile plains of the Jordan Valley and settled near Sodom, while Abraham remained in Canaan. God again confirmed his promise to Abraham, assuring him that his descendants would be as numerous as the dust of the earth. Years passed, but Abraham still had no children. He doubted how God's promise would be fulfilled. God reassured Abraham, promising him a son. To confirm this, God made a covenant with Abraham. He told Abraham to bring a heifer, a goat, a ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Abraham brought the sacrifices, cut the animals in half, and arranged the pieces opposite each other. And God, in the form of a smoking fire pot and a blazing torch, passed between these divided parts, confirming the covenant. Sarah, being barren, suggested that Abraham have a child with her maidservant, Hagar. Abraham agreed, and Hagar became pregnant. But this caused tension between Sarah and Hagar ran away. The angel of the Lord found her, told her to return, and promised that her son, Ishmael, would also become a great nation. Hagar gave birth to Ishmael when Abraham was 86 years old. When Abraham was 99, God appeared to him again and promised that Sarah would bear a son, Isaac, and establish the covenant of circumcision with Abraham and his descendants. Despite their old age, Abraham and Sarah believed in God's promise. Sodom and Gomorrah. While Abraham lived in the land of Canaan, nearby were two cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, known for their wickedness and cruelty. The people there committed many evil deeds, and God decided to destroy these cities because of their sins. One day, God decided to tell Abraham about his plan. Abraham, caring for the people, tried to persuade God not to destroy the cities if at least a few righteous people could be found in them. He started with 50 righteous people and went down to 10, asking if God would be merciful to the city for the sake of these people. God agreed that he would not destroy the cities if at least 10 righteous people were found. Meanwhile, 2 angels sent by God came to Sodom. At the city gate, they were met by Lot, Abraham's nephew, who invited them into his home to protect them from the evil reigning in the streets. At night, the men of the city surrounded Lot's house, demanding that he bring out his guests to them. But Lot refused and even offered his daughters instead of the guests to save the angels. The men became angry and tried to break into the house, but the angels struck them with blindness so they could not find the entrance. The next day, the angels told Lot that God was going to destroy the city and told him to take his family and flee. Lot hesitated, so the angels literally took him, his wife, and his daughters by the hand and led them out of the city, telling them not to look back. As Lot and his family fled, God began the destruction of the cities. He rained down sulfur and fire from the heavens, destroying Sodom and Gomorrah and everything in them. Lot and his family fled to a safe place, but Lot's wife, disobeying the angels, looked back and immediately turned into a pillar of salt. Lot and his daughters found refuge in a cave. There, Lot's daughters, thinking the whole world had been destroyed and they were left alone, decided to continue their father's lineage. They got Lot drunk with wine and, in turn, conceived sons by him, who became the ancestors of the peoples of Moab and Ammon. Thus ended the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, which became an example of God's wrath and punishment for sins, but also of the mercy shown to the righteous. The birth of Isaac. Abraham and his wife Sarah lived in the land of Canaan, following God's path. But their life was overshadowed by one great sorrow: they had no children. They were already very old. Abraham was about 100 years old, and Sarah was 90. Sarah had long lost hope of motherhood, and her heart was filled with sadness. One day, God spoke to Abraham again and repeated his promise made many years ago. He would have a son, and through this son, he would have descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Sarah heard this conversation and laughed because she could not believe that she, so old, could have a child. But God said, "Why did Sarah laugh? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and you will have a son." Time passed, and just as God had promised, Sarah became pregnant. It was a true miracle. She and Abraham could not believe their happiness, and a year later, at the appointed time, Sarah gave birth to a son. They named him Isaac, which means laughter, because Sarah had laughed first in disbelief and now in joy. Little Isaac grew up healthy and cheerful. Abraham and Sarah were endlessly happy and grateful to God for this miracle. They cared for him and loved him more than anything in the world. Isaac became living proof that God always keeps his promises, even when it seems impossible. The testing of Abraham. Abraham and Sarah lived in the land of Canaan, raising their long-awaited son, Isaac. He was the joy of their lives, their hope, and the heir to God's promises. Isaac grew up to be an obedient and loving boy, and his parents could not have been happier. But one day, God decided to test Abraham's faith. He called to him and said, "Abraham." He replied, "Here I am." And God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Abraham was stunned. God had given him this miraculous son and now demanded such a sacrifice. But Abraham did not argue. His faith in God was unshakable, and he knew that God had a plan he could not understand. Early the next morning, Abraham took Isaac, 2 servants, and a donkey loaded with wood for the altar. They set out for the land of Moriah. The journey was long and difficult, but Abraham did not show his feelings. On the 3rd day, Abraham saw the mountain God had spoken of. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood and placed it on Isaac's shoulders, while he himself carried the fire and the knife. Isaac, suspecting nothing, asked, "Father, we have the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham replied, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And they continued on their way. When they reached the place, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. Then he bound Isaac and laid him on the altar. Abraham raised the knife to slay his son. But at that moment, the angel of the Lord called out from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." He replied, "Here I am." And the angel said, "Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket nearby. He took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of Isaac. Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." The angel of the Lord called to Abraham again and said, "I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed me." Abraham and Isaac returned to their servants, and together they went home. This test showed the strength of Abraham's faith and his willingness to submit to God's will, even when it seemed impossible. The story of Isaac. Years passed, and Sarah, Abraham's wife, lived to a ripe old age. She lived 127 years, and at the end of her days passed away in Kiriath Arba, also known as Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Abraham mourned Sarah deeply and sought a place to bury her. He approached the Hittites, the local inhabitants, and asked to buy a burial plot. The Hittites recognized him as a great prince among them and offered him any place he chose for burial. Abraham chose the cave of Machpelah on the field of Ephron son of Zohar. Abraham offered to pay Ephron for the field and the cave. Ephron initially refused to take money, but Abraham insisted. He weighed out 400 shekels of silver for Ephron, and so the field and the cave became Abraham's property. There he buried Sarah with love and respect. After Sarah's death, Abraham became concerned about the future of his son, Isaac. He wanted to find him a wife from his own relatives, not from the Canaanites among whom they lived. So he called his faithful servant, Eliezer, and gave him an important task. Abraham ordered Eliezer to go to his native land and find a wife for Isaac there. Eliezer, being a faithful and wise servant, took 10 camels and many gifts and set off for the city of Nahor, where Abraham's brother lived. He prayed to God for help in his search, asking for a sign. When he asked a girl for water, she would not only give him a drink, but also offer water to his camels. Thus he would know that she was the one God had chosen for Isaac. When Eliezer came to the well outside the city, he saw a beautiful girl named Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, son of Nahor. He asked her for a little water from her jar, and she not only gave him a drink, but also watered all his camels. This was the sign he had been waiting for. Eliezer gave her gold jewelry and asked about her family. Learning that she belonged to Abraham's clan, he rejoiced and praised God. Eliezer went to Bethuel's house and told them about his mission. Rebekah's family, including her brother Laban, listened to him with respect and agreed to the marriage. Rebekah herself also agreed to go with Eliezer to become Isaac's wife. They set off, and soon the caravan returned to Abraham. They met Isaac in the field where he was praying and meditating. When he saw the caravan, his heart beat faster. Rebekah, seeing Isaac, got off her camel and asked Eliezer who it was. Learning that it was her future husband, she covered herself with a veil. Isaac brought Rebekah into his mother Sarah's tent, and she became his wife. He loved her, and she became a comfort to him after his mother's death. Thus, one chapter ended and a new one, filled with hope and love, began. Abraham lived a long and full life. After Sarah's death, he took a new wife named Keturah, and they had children. Abraham gave all his property to Isaac, and to the children of Keturah, he gave gifts and sent them eastward, away from Isaac, to avoid potential conflicts. Abraham saw his son Isaac find love and comfort in Rebekah, and this brought him joy. He lived among his people, continuing to be a respected patriarch. His wisdom and faith inspired many. When Abraham was 175 years old, he felt his time on earth was coming to an end. He had lived his life with faith in God, and God had blessed him with descendants, promising that his children would become a great nation. Abraham died at a good old age, full of years, and was gathered to his people. His sons, Isaac and Ishmael, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, next to his wife Sarah. This place had already become a family burial site, symbolizing the connection between generations. After Abraham's death, God blessed Isaac, who lived near the well of Lahairoi. Isaac continued his father's work, upholding the covenant with God and leading his family with wisdom and faith. Abraham left behind a legacy of faith and obedience to God. After the death of Abraham, his son Isaac became the head of the clan. He continued to live in the land of Canaan, but soon faced difficulties. A famine came to Canaan, and Isaac realized he needed to find a place where his family could survive. He decided to move to Gerar to endure the hard times. Gerar was not far from Canaan and was known for its fertile lands and good living conditions. When Isaac arrived in Gerar with his family, God appeared to him. God told Isaac, "Do not go down to Egypt, live in the land where I tell you to live. I will be with you and will bless you and your descendants, as I promised your father, Abraham." Isaac obeyed God and decided to stay in Gerar, trusting in his protection and blessing. Isaac remembered how his father, Abraham, had also moved in his time, and he feared for his life. He knew the local inhabitants might want to kill him for his beautiful wife, Rebekah. Therefore, like Abraham, Isaac decided to tell everyone that Rebekah was his sister, not his wife. He hoped they could avoid trouble this way. For a while, everything went well. But one day, Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, saw Isaac and Rebekah behaving together. He noticed they were too close for a brother and sister. Abimelech summoned Isaac and asked him, "Why did you say Rebekah is your sister? She is your wife." Isaac confessed that he had lied because he feared for his life. Abimelech was angry and said, "What have you done? Someone might have taken your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. Now, go, so that no one touches you or your wife." Isaac apologized, and Abimelech issued a decree forbidding anyone from harming Isaac and Rebekah. Isaac farmed and raised livestock. God blessed his labor, and his harvest was incredibly abundant. Each year his flocks grew, and his food supplies increased. He became a very wealthy and influential man. But this caused envy among the local residents. The Philistines began to harm Isaac by filling in the wells that Abraham's servants had dug. These wells were vital for watering his flocks and fields. King Abimelech, seeing how Isaac was becoming richer and more powerful, became afraid. He thought Isaac might become a threat to his power and asked him to leave. He said, "Move away from us. You have become too powerful for us." Isaac did not argue and moved his family to the valley of Gerar. In the valley, Isaac redug the wells his father Abraham had dug. He gave them the same names as before, but the local shepherds again began to argue with his servants, claiming the water belonged to them. Isaac named the first well Ezek, which means dispute, and the second Sitnah, which means opposition. Finally, Isaac dug a third well, and this time no one argued. He named it Rehoboth, which means spaciousness, and said, "Now the Lord has given us room, and we will flourish in the land." After this, Isaac went to Beersheba. The Lord appeared to him and confirmed his promise to bless him and increase his descendants for Abraham's sake. Isaac built an altar there, called on the name of the Lord, and pitched his tent. His servants dug another well. Meanwhile, Abimelech came to Isaac from Gerar with his friends. Isaac asked them why they had come if they had previously hated him and asked him to leave. Abimelech replied that he saw how God was blessing Isaac and proposed a peace treaty with him. They swore friendship to each other and held a feast. The next day, Isaac sent them away in peace. That same day, Isaac's servants told him they had found water in the new well. He named it Sheba, which means oath, and the city was named Beersheba, meaning well of the oath. Isaac and Rebekah had two twin sons, Esau and Jacob. Esau, at the age of 40, married two Hittite women, which caused great grief for Isaac and Rebekah. The story of Jacob. Jacob and Esau, the sons of Isaac and Rebekah, born as twins, were different from the very beginning of their lives. Esau was born first, so he had the birthright, which meant receiving a double share of the inheritance and a special blessing from his father. However, from childhood, their life paths developed differently. Esau grew up to be a hunter who loved spending time outdoors, whereas Jacob was quieter and preferred to stay at home. One day, Esau returned from hunting very hungry and saw that Jacob was cooking a tasty stew. Esau asked for some food, and Jacob, seizing the moment, offered to trade the stew for the birthright. Esau, thinking only of his hunger, agreed. Thus, Jacob cunningly acquired the birthright. But the struggle for the birthright did not end there. When Isaac grew old and his eyesight became very poor, he decided to bless Esau to pass on the blessing of the firstborn. Rebekah, who loved Jacob more than Esau, overheard the conversation and decided to help her younger son get the father's blessing. She devised a plan to dress Jacob in Esau's clothes and cover his hands and neck with goatskin to make him seem as hairy as his brother. Jacob brought his father a dish prepared according to Rebekah's recipe and deceitfully received Isaac's blessing. When Esau learned that his blessing had been stolen, he was furious and vowed to kill Jacob. Rebekah, learning of this, advised Jacob to flee to her brother Laban in Haran to save himself. In Haran, Jacob found refuge with Laban and fell in love with his daughter Rachel. He agreed to work for Laban for 7 years to marry her. However, Laban deceived Jacob and gave him his older daughter, Leah, instead. Jacob was forced to work another 7 years to finally marry Rachel. After many years, Jacob became a wealthy man, and God commanded him to return to the land of his ancestors. Jacob feared meeting Esau, but during his return, he had a spiritual experience. He wrestled with an unknown man all night, and that man, who turned out to be an angel, blessed him, changing his name to Israel. When Jacob and Esau finally met, Jacob feared revenge, but Esau forgave him, and they reconciled. The story of Joseph. Jacob had 12 sons, and one of them was Joseph, who was his favorite son. Joseph was the son of Rachel, Jacob's beloved wife, and therefore received more attention and care than the other sons. Jacob even gave Joseph a multicolored coat, which caused envy and hatred among his brothers. Joseph also had strange dreams. In one dream, He saw his sheaf of wheat stand upright while his brothers' sheaves bowed down to it. In another dream, he saw the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing down to him. These dreams, hinting at his future authority over his brothers, angered them even more. One day, when Joseph came to visit his brothers, they decided to get rid of him. At first, they wanted to kill him, but then one of the brothers, Judah, suggested selling Joseph to traders heading to Egypt. They sold him for 20 pieces of silver and then dipped his multicolored coat in goat's blood, bringing it to their father. They said that Joseph had been the victim of wild animals. Jacob was inconsolable, believing his beloved son was dead. In Egypt, Joseph was sold as a slave to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. But God was with Joseph, and he quickly gained Potiphar's trust, becoming the manager of his household. However, Potiphar's wife tried to seduce Joseph, and when he refused, she falsely accused him of attacking her. Potiphar, enraged, threw Joseph into prison. Even in prison, Joseph did not lose heart. God was with him, and soon he was managing all the affairs of the prison. One day, 2 prisoners approached him who had strange dreams. Joseph, having the gift of interpreting dreams, explained their dreams. One of the prisoners, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, was restored to his position and promised to remember Joseph. 2 years later, Pharaoh had disturbing dreams that no one could explain. The cupbearer remembered Joseph and advised Pharaoh to turn to him. Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, predicting 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. Impressed by Joseph's wisdom, Pharaoh appointed him second in command in Egypt, managing the entire country. When the years of famine came, Joseph managed the distribution of grain reserves. Soon the famine reached the land of Canaan, where his brothers lived with their father. Jacob sent his sons to Egypt for grain. The brothers came to Joseph but did not recognize him. Joseph, recognizing his brothers, decided to test them. He accused them of being spies and demanded that they bring their youngest brother, Benjamin. The brothers returned home and, despite Jacob's fears, took Benjamin with them to Egypt. Joseph, seeing Benjamin, held a feast for his brothers but hid his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. The next day, they were overtaken and accused of stealing the cup. The brothers, in despair, returned to Joseph and begged him for mercy, offering themselves as slaves instead of Benjamin. Touched by the sincerity and remorse of his brothers, Joseph revealed himself to them, saying he was their brother. They could not believe their eyes and were at first afraid, but Joseph comforted them, saying that it was God's plan for the salvation of their family. He invited them all, along with Jacob, to move to Egypt. Jacob and his entire family moved to Egypt. Joseph met his father and gave them the best land in Goshen. Jacob lived in Egypt for another 17 years and died, blessing his sons and grandsons. Joseph forgave his brothers and provided for them in Egypt. He lived a long and prosperous life, always remembering that all trials led to the fulfillment of God's plan. Many years had passed since Jacob's family moved to Egypt. Their descendants, the Israelites, became a numerous people. A new Pharaoh, who did not know Joseph, feared them because there were so many. He made them slaves and forced them to do hard labor, building cities and pyramids. But despite the harsh conditions, the Israelites continued to grow in number. Pharaoh decided to take even crueler measures. He ordered all newborn Israelite boys to be killed. The story of Moses. During this time, a boy was born whose parents hid him to save his life. When they could no longer hide him, his mother placed him in a woven basket and set it afloat on the Nile River, trusting in God's mercy. Pharaoh's daughter found the basket while bathing in the river. She saw the crying baby and felt pity for him. She decided to adopt him and named him Moses, which means drawn out of the water. Through a clever plan, Moses' own mother became his nurse, and so Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace, receiving an education while knowing he was an Israelite. When Moses grew up, he saw an Egyptian mistreating an Israelite. Moses could not bear it and killed the Egyptian, for which he had to flee into the desert to escape Pharaoh's wrath. He found refuge in the land of Midian and became a shepherd. He married Zipporah, the daughter of a local priest, Jethro. One day, while Moses was tending sheep near Mount Horeb, he saw a strange phenomenon. A bush was on fire but was not burning up. Moses went closer to look at this miracle, and then he heard the voice of God calling him. God said that he had seen the suffering of his people in Egypt and had decided to save them. He chose Moses to lead the Israelites out of slavery. Moses was hesitant and full of doubt, but God gave him signs to prove his power, turning his staff into a snake and back, and making his hand leprous, and then healing it. With these signs and the assurance of God's support, Moses returned to Egypt to fulfill his mission. Together with his brother Aaron, they began to convince the Israelites and Pharaoh that the time had come to let God's people go. Trials and miracles awaited them, but Moses was ready to follow God's call and lead his people to freedom. The 10 plagues of Egypt. Moses and Aaron returned to Egypt to do God's will and free the Israelites from slavery. They came to Pharaoh and delivered God's message, "Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness." But Pharaoh did not want to let the Israelites go and even made their work harder, forcing them to gather their own straw for bricks. God decided to show his power through Moses and Aaron to force Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. He sent 10 terrible plagues upon Egypt, each one more dreadful than the last. Water turned to blood. Moses struck the water of the Nile with his staff, and all the water in the river turned to blood. The fish died, and the water became undrinkable. Frogs. Egypt was overrun with frogs that came out of the rivers and filled the houses, palaces, and even people's bedrooms. Gnats. Moses struck the dust of the ground with his staff, and all the dust turned into gnats that tormented people and animals. Flies. Swarms of flies infested Egypt, filling all the houses and palaces. Only the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived, remained without flies. Death of livestock. All the Egyptian animals fell sick and died, but the livestock of the Israelites remained healthy. Boils. Moses and Aaron took soot from a furnace and threw it into the air. People and animals were covered with festering boils, and the pain was unbearable. Hail. Moses stretched his hand toward the sky, and a terrible thunderstorm with hail began, which destroyed the fields and killed people and animals. Only the land of Goshen was unharmed. Locusts. God sent locusts that ate everything that was left after the hail. Egypt was in despair, but Pharaoh still would not let the Israelites go. Darkness. For 3 days, a thick darkness covered Egypt. People could not see each other and did not leave their homes, but in the land of Goshen, there was light. Death of the firstborn. This was the most terrible plague. God said that on that night, the firstborn in every Egyptian house would die, from the son of Pharaoh to the firstborn of the livestock. But he gave the Israelites special instructions to slaughter a lamb and mark the doorposts of their houses with its blood. The angel of death passed over the houses with this blood. Pharaoh, having lost his firstborn son, was horrified. He summoned Moses and Aaron at night and told them, "Go, serve your God as you have said. Take your people, your animals, and leave." At last, the Israelites were free. They gathered their belongings, taking with them the gold and silver the Egyptians had given them, and set out on their journey. God led them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, crossing the Red Sea and journey in the wilderness. After the Israelites left Egypt, they began their journey to the Promised Land. God led them through the wilderness in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night so they could travel day and night. They journeyed toward the Red Sea. Suddenly, Pharaoh changed his mind and decided to bring back his slaves. He gathered his army and pursued the Israelites with his chariots. When the Israelites saw the Egyptians, they were terrified and began to complain to Moses, "It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die here in the wilderness." But Moses told them, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Lord will fight for you." God told Moses to raise his staff over the sea. When Moses did so, the waters of the Red Sea parted, and a dry path opened up before the Israelites. They walked on the seabed, with the water forming a wall on both sides. The Egyptians chased after them, but God hindered them by slowing their chariot wheels. When the last of the Israelites had crossed to the other side, God commanded Moses to raise his staff over the sea again. The water returned to its place, and the Egyptian army was washed away by the powerful waves. The Israelites were saved. After the miracle at the Red Sea, the Israelites continued their journey through the wilderness, but soon began to complain about a lack of water. Moses prayed to God, and God showed him a piece of wood, which he threw into the bitter water, and the water became sweet and drinkable. Then they began to complain about a lack of food. God sent them manna, a special bread from heaven that they found on the ground every morning, and quail that flew to their camp every evening. On their way through the desert, they again faced a water shortage at Massa and Meribah. The people grumbled, and God told Moses to strike a rock with his staff. When Moses did so, water flowed from the rock, and the people were able to quench their thirst. At Rephidim, the Israelites faced an attack from the Amalekites. Moses went up to the top of a hill with the staff of God in his hands, while Joshua led the Israelite army. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning, but when he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. Aaron and Hur held up Moses' hands until sunset, and the Israelites were victorious. The 10 Commandments. After a long journey through the desert, the Israelites finally reached the foot of Mount Sinai. There, God decided to make a covenant with them and give them his laws. Moses went up the mountain, and God spoke to him, saying that if the Israelites kept his covenant, they would become his chosen people, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Moses relayed these words to the people, and all the Israelites answered in unison, "We will do everything the Lord has said." Then God told Moses to prepare the people for a great event. In 3 days, he would descend on Mount Sinai to speak with them personally. On the 3rd day, early in the morning, there was thunder and lightning on the mountain, and a thick cloud covered the peak. A loud trumpet blast was heard, and all the people trembled in fear. God summoned Moses to the top of the mountain and gave him the 10 Commandments, inscribed on stone tablets. "You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, wife, or anything that belongs to your neighbor." In addition to the 10 Commandments, God gave Moses many other laws concerning daily life, justice, and mercy. Moses came down from the mountain and told the people all the laws and commandments that God had given him. The people again unanimously agreed to obey everything the Lord had said. Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord and built an altar at the foot of the mountain. The golden calf. While Moses was delayed on Mount Sinai, the people of Israel became anxious. They approached Aaron and asked him to make them a new god to lead them. Aaron agreed and collected all the gold jewelry from the people. From this gold, he made a statue of a golden calf. The people rejoiced and celebrated, worshiping this idol. They said, "This is our God who brought us out of Egypt." On Mount Sinai, God saw what was happening and told Moses, "Go down, because your people, whom you brought out of Egypt, have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf." Moses descended from the mountain, carrying the 2 stone tablets with the commandments given by God. When he saw the golden calf and the people dancing around it, he broke the tablets in anger. Then he took the calf, burned it in the fire, ground it to powder, mixed it with water, and made the Israelites drink it. Moses confronted Aaron, but Aaron made excuses. Moses stood at the entrance to the camp and said, "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." All the sons of Levi rallied to him. Moses commanded them to go through the camp and punish those who had worshipped the calf. About 3,000 people died. The next day, Moses went up the mountain again to pray for the people and ask God to forgive their sin. The Lord commanded Moses to cut new stone tablets to write the commandments that were on the first tablets, which Moses had broken. Moses spent another 40 days and nights on the mountain, and God renewed the covenant with him and the people of Israel. When Moses came down, his face was radiant from having spoken with God. The people were afraid to approach him, so Moses put a veil over his face. The tabernacle. After God forgave the Israelites for worshiping the golden calf, he gave Moses instructions for building the tabernacle, a sanctuary where God would dwell among his people. Moses gathered all the Israelites and told them of God's commands. The people responded with great joy, bringing their valuables and materials as offerings. Skilled craftsmen also brought their skills and knowledge. Moses appointed Bezalel and Oholiab as the chief craftsmen. God gave them wisdom and skill so they could teach others and lead the work. The tabernacle consisted of several parts. In the center was the Holy of Holies, the place where the Ark of the Covenant was to be kept. The ark was made of acacia wood and covered with gold. Inside the ark were the tablets with the 10 commandments. Before the Holy of Holies was the holy place, which contained the golden lampstand, the table for the bread of the presence, and the altar of incense. The tabernacle was surrounded by a courtyard where the altar of burnt offering and a bronze basin stood. When all the work was completed, Moses inspected every part of the tabernacle and made sure everything was done according to God's plan. On the first day of the first month of the 2nd year after the Exodus from Egypt, the tabernacle was set up. When the tabernacle was finished, the cloud of the Lord covered it, and the glory of God filled the sanctuary. This was a sign that God had accepted their work and would dwell among his people. From then on, the cloud was over the tabernacle by day, and at night it became a pillar of fire. Joshua and the conquest of Canaan. After the death of Moses, God chose Joshua as the new leader of the Israelites. He commissioned Joshua to lead the people into the land of Canaan, which he had promised their ancestors. God encouraged Joshua, saying, "Be strong and courageous. I will be with you as I was with Moses. Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged." Joshua began to prepare the people for crossing the Jordan River. He sent 2 spies to the city of Jericho to scout the land. The spies stayed with a woman named Rahab. She hid them from the king of Jericho and helped them escape because she believed in the power of the God of the Israelites. In gratitude, the spies promised that when the city was taken, she and her family would be spared. When it was time to cross the Jordan, God performed a miracle. The priests carried the Ark of the Covenant, and when their feet touched the water, the river stopped flowing, and the people crossed on dry ground. The first city to be conquered was Jericho. God gave Joshua unusual instructions. For 7 days, the warriors were to march around the city while the priests blew their trumpets. On the 7th day, they marched around the city 7 times, and when the trumpets sounded and the people gave a loud shout, the walls of Jericho collapsed. The Israelites captured the city, destroying all its inhabitants except for Rahab and her family. After the victory at Jericho, the Israelites marched toward the city of Ai. At first, they were defeated because of the sin of one of their warriors, Achan, who had taken forbidden loot from Jericho. After Achan was punished, they attacked Ai again and were victorious. The victory at Ai was the beginning of the great conquest of Canaan. Joshua led the Israelite army from city to city, defeating numerous kings and their armies. One of the most amazing events was the battle at Gideon. 5 kings united against the Israelites. Joshua prayed to God, and God made the sun stand still for a whole day until the Israelites had defeated their enemies. After all these conquests, the land was divided among the 12 tribes of Israel. Joshua called the people to remain faithful to God, to follow his commandments, and to remember all the great things God had done for them. King Solomon. Solomon, David's son, became king of Israel after his father's death. Young and inexperienced, he understood that ruling a great nation was a huge responsibility. One night, God appeared to Solomon in a dream and offered to grant him any wish. Solomon, realizing he needed wisdom, asked God for the ability to judge the people fairly. God was pleased with Solomon's request and gave him not only wisdom, but also wealth and a long life. One of Solomon's greatest achievements was the construction of the temple in Jerusalem. David had dreamed of building this temple, but God entrusted this task to Solomon. The construction took 7 years. When the temple was completed, it was a true wonder of the world. Inside, the walls were covered with pure gold, with carved figures of angels and decorated doors. The central place was the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant was kept. Solomon also built many other impressive buildings and fortifications, including his luxurious palace. He developed trade and made peace treaties with neighboring countries, which led to prosperity and wealth for Israel. However, Solomon made mistakes. He took many wives from different nations, and some of them brought their gods to Israel. Gradually, Solomon began to worship these gods, which displeased the God of Israel. God warned Solomon that because of this, his kingdom would be divided after his death. Prophets and kings. After the split, the history of Israel and Judah was full of rises and falls, faithfulness and apostasy. In Israel, the northern kingdom, Jeroboam's golden calves marked the start of ongoing idolatry. Every succeeding king followed his example, turning the people from God. One of the most infamous rulers was Ahab. He married Jezebel, the daughter of the Sidonian king, who brought with her the worship of Baal. Ahab and Jezebel spread this cult throughout Israel, leading many into deep rebellion. But at that time the prophet Elijah rose up against idolatry. On Mount Carmel, he challenged the prophets of Baal. They prayed all day, but nothing happened. Then Elijah prayed, and God sent fire from heaven, consuming the sacrifice. The people acknowledged that the Lord was the true God, though their repentance was short-lived. In Judah, the southern kingdom, the situation was somewhat better. Some kings remained faithful to God and sought to follow his laws. Among them was Hezekiah, who reformed religion, destroyed idols, and restored worship in the temple. He prayed and received miraculous healing and protection from Assyrian attack. Another outstanding king was Josiah, who rediscovered the Book of the Law in the temple. Shocked by how far the people had strayed, Josiah led sweeping reforms, destroying idols and renewing true worship. Yet not all Judah's kings were righteous. Some, like Manasseh, led the nation into even worse idolatry and sin. Manasseh even sacrificed his own son. Such wickedness provoked God to judge Judah, just as he had judged Israel. Exile and hope. Ultimately, neither Israel nor Judah remained faithful to God's commandments. Israel was conquered by the Assyrians, and its people were taken away. Later Judah was captured by the Babylonians, and the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed. These events showed that turning away from God leads to ruin. Yet even then, God loved his people and sent prophets to call them to repentance and to give hope. Prophets like Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel encouraged faith during dark times. Jeremiah, often called the weeping prophet, stayed in Judah when others were exiled. He warned of Jerusalem's fall but also wrote letters to the captives, urging them to settle in Babylon and trust that God would bring them home. Ezekiel, among the exiles, shared vivid visions, like the Valley of Dry Bones, that foretold Israel's restoration. Daniel, taken to Babylon as a young man, rose to high office through wisdom and steadfast faith. Even when threatened with death for praying to God, he remained faithful and was miraculously saved from lions. Through these prophets, God reminded his people that their suffering would not last forever. He promised to give them a new heart and restore their land. Return and restoration. After 70 years, God fulfilled his promise and allowed the Israelites to return. When Persia conquered Babylon, King Cyrus issued a decree in 538 BCE permitting them to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. The first group, led by Zerubbabel and the high priest Joshua, laid the temple's foundations despite opposition and hardship. Later, Ezra the scribe came with more exiles, teaching God's law and reviving spiritual life. Nehemiah, a trusted servant of King Artaxerxes, obtained permission to rebuild Jerusalem's walls. Under his leadership, the people worked with determination, completing the walls in just 52 days. Nehemiah also enacted reforms, restoring justice, keeping the Sabbath, and fighting corruption. The return from exile and the rebuilding of Jerusalem became symbols of hope and renewal. Despite trials, the people showed that with faith in God they could overcome anything. Their story continues to inspire, reminding us of the importance of faith, unity, and perseverance in difficult times.